Invitation.
Real quick reminder, everyone, we still have quite a bit of agenda for the afternoon, so feel free to invite other folks and colleagues to join. You can just share that link, and anyone is welcome to attend. So next, we're going to have Martin Morse come to the stage. And Martin is the Vice President of Brand Strategy and Business Development at Bulletproof. And for this conversation, I'm going to be talking to you, Martin.
Let's unmute. There we go.
All
And we'll
right.
start the video. There we go. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Very good. Very good.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I've been excited about this session. You have a very impressive background. So before we jump into more questions about your current role, why don't you tell us about your background and what led you to take this position at Bulletproof?
Wow. Um, I've had a pretty colorful background. So from professional sports as a professional basketball player, very long time ago, having a cup of coffee in the league, and then quickly moving into Wall Street and doing a lot of private equity business there for 12 years as a commodities trader and private equity uh, uh, lead. And then from there, moved into the business of brand marketing simply because we were financially mentoring athletes and celebrities and high profile personalities. And, this is 10 years ago, a little bit more, when the space of influencer marketing didn't really exist yet. And it was the burgeoning like horizon of social media and then what tool would enable. And we wanted to make sure we controlled the brand of our clients, not just on the financial side, but obviously as they show up in the marketplace, because that's currency, right? You put a high profile individual in a company for a campaign, and it's like, it's either a shot of nitrogen or nitrous, or it just falls flat. So if we can actually help those brands manage the way those clients used to show up, then yeah, we actually, we had something there. And then from there, it just kind of moved into brand advisory, being able to get very hands-on and granular with a lot of campaigns, and then watching that whole space of influencer marketing grow. And then from there, I got a client from this guy named Dave Asprey, and he's the founder of Bulletproof. And it was funny how it just kind of all worked, like the universe conspired. So our clients was a big professional athlete, and was like, swore by this diet called Bulletproof. And we were like, what the hell is Bulletproof? And then from there, we just got really involved in the space, started watching the space, because Bulletproof created 4 market categories in the CPG category. And we just got enamored by it and just started to see the movement that a brand creates in a lifestyle. And then from there, long story short, Dave asked me to come on and consider a full-time position, and that's where I've been now for the past year and a half officially, and about 3 years altogether.
Right on. Yeah, it's a great story. And what are you responsible for now?
The entire way the portfolio outside of Bulletproof, in addition to Bulletproof, there's 6 other companies in the portfolio in the health and wellness space. So essentially how we show up externally, that was a great conversation just previous, where it's like, what did Pancho say? Chief uncertainty officer, and having plans like A through Z now. It's kind of my role. So how did the brand show up? Why they show up the way they show up? How do we stay consistent in messaging and mission? And then how do we actually develop audience architecture that we can expand and grow on, talk to even more so now, continue to push out thought leadership and opportunities to obviously drive our brand and our mission.
Nice. So it sounds like there's a lot of different places that you can show up as a brand,
Yeah.
and chief uncertainty officer is probably the role that has to think about all of the different environments where consumers are going to encounter your product and your brand. What are some of the channels that you're most invested in, and how has it changed in the past couple months with COVID?
I'll say the last 6 months, it's changed for us because we are now developing our own channels. So basically, Bulletproof Media, it was kind of our long-term focus and goal, but COVID happened, and all of a sudden, our traffic spiked on our own channels. So we took that and started to harness the opportunity of new users coming to just find information, right? Obviously, health and I don't like using the term wellness for us, at least, for health and preventative lifestyle. We are kind of like the one-stop shop, right? Like, make our content free, educate people, give something of value, and don't try to sell anything. Just be there. And especially now, over the last 6 months, what we've seen is if you just show up and you're consistent and you kind of offer that like helping hand, and you're just like a good Samaritan almost in your messaging, then people will remember that, especially during a trying time. Like, everyone's going through it, everyone. And there's never been a time in the history of history where everyone has had to just stop all at once. And it's really opened up opportunity for conversation. It's opened up opportunity for new learning. It's opened up an opportunity to spend time. And that's the most precious commodity that we get to exchange with people, is their time. If you're going to come to our channels, it better be worth it. So putting in value into that content is huge for us. And we've had a challenge just simply because we can't keep up with the content production, simply because of everyone's virtual. Production has been, figuring out new avenues and ways to push that content out and create the content. It was a good opportunity for us to go into the archives and then see what actually worked in the past, who those pieces of content would resonate the best with. And that has actually been a really good measuring stick for us when it comes to measuring the response and reaction of our consumers.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear, just like in conversation, and also just this whole event. We've had Carly Zip from TikTok. We're going to have the head of brand marketing from YouTube, speaking next. And hearing from yourself, the theme is just around creating content that adds value, and creating ads. It seems like is kind of a thing of the past, and like these teams are focused on creating content. And it's ads are very much like get in my purchase funnel, or you're part of the 99% of people who didn't click. And it sounds like the thinking about ads now is like, how do we speak to like 100% of the people with the message that they want them to leave with the brand? And it sounds like that's not a challenge for your team. It's almost almost having too much content. So how do you, like, what type of people are you hiring, and how do you like stay fresh with this kind of value driven content without it being the same stuff over and over again?
Yeah. Well, there's two parts to that. Number one, we now have a completely new subject matter that we can talk about: COVID and the science behind it, the cause and effect, all the things that people were really not in tune to or focused on previous to COVID, which means just as basic as like, hey, did you know that 1 in 3 people can't process or digest kale, right? Like, kale is bad for you. And as a result, we can now talk about it. And why? Because ultimately it shifts your immune system and in the systems in which your body are comprised of, blah, 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 all the way down. So COVID has actually given us an opportunity to have quick content development, conversational content that is not ad centric. We don't want to get you into a funnel. We don't want you to move into a, conversion space. We just want to have a conversation. And for us, it's worked incredible. So that's the first part of that. We actually get to have meaningful conversations on the fly, and we get to field questions and conversations around what's happening now. The other part of that is Gen Z. It's the subject that we're talking about. We're betting on that space, entirely that community, right? So for us, we service a huge demographic, literally, 13, 14-year-old all the way to 80 plus in our demographic. It's massive. But each of those demographics, listens differently, has different questions, has different interests. So how do you then get as much coverage as you can out of that massive swath without having to be in like a million different content buckets? So for us, we're drilling down to Gen Z and really developing conversation around what we now call cuspers, like kind of Gen Z, kind of millennial, kind of stuck in the middle, but like super in tune to what's going on in the world and the planet today, grew up with the internet and social media, know exactly when they're being pitched an ad as opposed to a conversation or a movement. And that affects, 4 different demographics, right? Like, if I'm a 14 to 17-year-old kid, like my mom is or my dad is gonna go out and buy me X, Y, or Z. So I'm gonna engage my parents. They're going to actually have an interest in what that kid has an interest in. And then that parent is either going to have the opportunity to speak to their grandparent or their parent, which is the kid's grandparent. And then from there, at the upper end of the millennial spectrum, age-wise, like these are now, folks that are having kids themselves. And so now they get to, develop their own household. And then also in that, like how they're going to spend their dollar. The conscious dollar is driving conversion right now. It's like, are you a brand that stands for something? Do you have involvement in your community? What are you doing in that community? And does it resonate for a Gen Z or a millennial or, someone that's sitting on the other end of that communication, which then pushes them or drives them to say, you know what, I like that brand, right? Like I'll spend my dollar there. And it's a hard-earned dollar, especially right now.
No, and it sounds so simple, right? The way you explain, like, creating content, and having members who understand the community. But really, it's even simpler to just slap a product and a price tag and say, click here. There is like an art and a science to like how you're seeing the conversation. So how do you have how do you hire? How do you find the right team of people? And are these teams internal, or do you work with agencies to help you figure out develop content and figure out what type of content you should be creating, or is that all in-house?
We actually are in-house, just simply because we have so much content, and Bulletproof was actually started out of a blog. So the founder of Bulletproof, whose real job was in Silicon Valley as a CTO, like literally just started blogging about his health journey. And that was over 20 years ago. And so from there, the content has just been cataloged and inventoried. And so we actually have a huge treasure trove of content we can go back and repurpose. And so we have teams internally that do that. I'm glad you said arts that go along with the science, because I find that we get bogged down into the data. We get bogged down into the what and velocities and conversions and all the buzzwords that marketers love to throw out, especially on the agency side. And, most brands get sucked down into that rabbit hole and forget the why. And the why is the most important thing when you're connecting to someone on the other end of whatever portal or platform or communication device you're using. And then obviously there's the how to use those platforms, and then there's a science behind that, of course. But if you just lead with the why, and that obviously goes back to what we were talking about on the value side. Like if you're going to offer value, it's hard to argue with that. And if it's meaningful, it's hard to forget it. So that's been the intention and the idea behind all of the content that we generate, from the podcast that we have to our blog and the podcast. It's crazy. We've seen in the last 6 months, our numbers go through the roof on our podcast. And it's simply just because it's meaningful information and it costs nothing, but it leaves such an indelible imprint when it comes to a consumer's, state of mind. Because, next time they're surfing through whatever digital store or online marketplace, or even now going back to the stores, they're going to remember like, oh yeah, I think I heard that somewhere. Oh, it was that orange and white brand that's called Bulletproof. So it's a long way to go around, but for us, it's about legacy. So it may take a little longer to actually create that conversion, but once that person is converted, or that family or that household is converted, they're there. They're staying for the long haul.
Yep. What's fascinating about that too is like, we're not just talking TikTok or just talking social media
Yeah.
for that matter. It's blog, it's podcast. How are you? I mean, can you just help us get an idea of the quantity of content that's being created by your in-house team on a weekly basis? Like the number of channels is absurd.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So I'll just give you an example. Just the podcast alone, we're doing 3 shows a week. 3 shows a week. It is on the back end of that podcast. So, and each podcast is an hour, roughly, approximately like 60 minutes ish long. And I mean, they have the podcast team has slots booked up until 2021. So 3 shows a week, and then the overlap that goes into social media. Instagram Live has been huge for us because you now get to do deep dives on certain particular subject matters out of those podcasts that then fold into the blog. You could do super deep dive research on the blog, and it's like literally we've created this Bible almost when it comes to like, A to Z. You just keyword in and it's there. And that's credit to just our digital team. They spend an exorbitant amount of time cataloging, organizing, creating search tools, and it's awesome. We've got engineers doing that pretty much day to day. And then A/B testing content across other platforms, right? Like, again, what resonates for mid-60 person living in Wisconsin may not be the same for a 22-year-old living in Miami, right? So how do we make all of that content accessible, and how do we make it relatable to everyone? And the engineers on our side do an amazing job of that. So yeah.
Nice. I'm curious to learn more about paid media. So we talk a lot about social, and it sounds like a whole lot of your the impressions are earned through really valuable content.
Yeah.
What are you doing in terms of paid approaches to amplify that type of distribution? And are you using content in like things that you use for Instagram, or using that content in other environments too, or is it specifically for the environment that you've created it?
We'll do specific to platform, just because we have so much content. We know what works on each platform, and the paid stuff, we actually don't do a lot of it. And we're really lucky in that regard, just because we've created such critical mass and inertia that, folks know where to go to get certain pieces of information. And, obviously on the digital side with the teams that we have in-house, they do all the traditional SEO and all the gears, the levers, and the buttons you can push in order to get content flowing out there and drive traffic. Yes, but ultimately we've just been very we've been very lucky that we've developed this over a lot of years to just have such critical mass where we get to have those conversations. And we find that just the more organic conversations we have, the better.
Yep. Yeah, and the more we're talking, the more I'm kind of understanding your team to be really a content machine. That's content on a regular basis. Coming into COVID and having that team not being able to sit together and brainstorm together, have you seen changes or new challenges in terms of creating content?
Yes and no. Only on the video stuff, which we actually figured out a way to. And we were always virtual. We were set up that way 7 years ago when our founder created the company. It's that he's a Silicon Valley guy, right? So he was like, we're gonna get more production, more efficiency, and you get more free time. Just get your work done, and everyone's virtual. So we didn't really have that big of a learning curve. The bigger learning curve that I was tasked to kind of figure out was, how do we manage the time where people aren't burning out? Because that was the biggest pain point on the content side, the production side, and the content team side. Like, how do we not burn that squad out and make sure that they're, firing all cylinders and have enough space, bandwidth, time to be creative, to, ideate in a way that they do, and then have it actually come into a nice package for people to consume, right? That was the biggest pain point for us. And but I will say, so much creativity has come out of the last 3 months, 4 months for us. A lot of creativity, and it was great because because everyone was quarantined, we actually got a lot of time together, virtually be it, but we've just welcomed it. Hey, ping me if you need something, ping me if you have an idea, ping our founder if you have an idea. And he was super, super hands-on and very, very, very available, which made it really awesome for the content team.
Nice. So my company Spaceback, so we help brands recreate their social media content and run it in paid environments. So like ad units look and feel a lot more social, and we find that's a more authentic experience in a standard ad unit, and it works really well. But a lot of what the brands we're working with do ask us about and struggle with is how to build a content team like yours that is really creating content consistently and not doing like kind of a one-off content calendar. And then but it sounds like your in-house team is just there's always content that's being created that you can leverage. Can you share some guidance on just for other brands who may aspire to have an in-house content team that's as prolific? What are some tips you can share in terms of hiring, size of team, type of like is the expertise more on the design side and photographers and creative, or is it more social media like listeners and analytical? But like how would someone go about building a team like yours in-house at their own company?
Great question. I would say it's very specific to the mission and the goal of the company, right? If your goal is to sell a widget, then make sure you conversate and communicate how awesome that widget is, which resonates with the demographic in which you've identified. So for us, audience architecture was huge. It took us about 1.5 years to drill down into this cusper community instead of like this, 13, 14-year-old to 80-year-old demographic. Like, how do we speak to as many people as we can without having to create mind-blowing, head-exploding, team stressing, pieces of content like multiple times a day? Because we're not a newsroom. We don't
Right.
we don't operate like that. But I would say the number one thing is identifying your audience that allows you to have the widest conversation, and then from there drill down into the content that community enjoys, and then building the team. For us, I love finding talent that is not actually that doesn't actually know how awesome they are at what they do. And so it's really just actually, I'll give you a good example. We held about a year ago, we held a competition to be in an internship program that would directly work with our senior leadership as well as our chairman and founder. And we were like, you don't have to have experience, you don't have to have a background in science or health and food and beverage or whatever. We just want to know what your thoughts are, where you come from, and give us your best piece of written content in 1,500 words or less. And we got like flooded with applications and content. So number one, we got like thousands of pieces of content that we could actually sift through. And then that allowed us to see who was listening to us in the first place and then what mattered to them. And then from that, we picked 3 interns that then came aboard and worked with us during the summer and just developed really, really, really good talent out of it as a result. So doing stuff like
Uh-oh, Martin. Well, everyone, I'm not sure if it's me or Martin, so people can hear me. I'm gonna check in with Martin.
actually, if your job is to be a content producer.
Hey, Martin, you there for just about just until you were finished speaking. So I don't think we got anything there. You're back now and crystal clear. But if you won't mind rewinding 30 seconds or so, that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Give you another try at that one.
I don't know if you heard the internship competition that we had. And then
Yes, we got that. So where I lost you was it sounds like a few of those interns maybe are part of the team now.
uh, yes and no. They had to go back and finish out the rest of what their life is, and but what it did was allow us to find talent in not the same pools where we used to dip in from, right, and pull talent from. And it actually opened up our eyes to producing new content, new types of content, what may or may not resonate with certain demographics. And then from there, it we worked hand in hand with those interns that then worked hand in hand with our permanent content teams, but then more importantly, giving them time and space to just create. And we're way ahead of the curve when it comes to producing content. And we have hubs where we know we're going to push content out through, whether it's, more sleep focused or more food focused or more mental health focused or whatever the case may be. So we have a huge curve when it comes to, or runway rather, when it comes to pushing content out that allows the team to just create, have space and time, not be under a deadline or a guideline that they have to follow, like, marching orders, which we find is just super awesome when it comes to creative content.
Yep. Makes sense. Yeah, apologies for the technical difficulties there, but one thing that it sounds like you were saying there is get Gen Z. We're talking about marketing towards Gen Z, and it sounds like you gave them a voice even to your content team directly, where they might not even had confidence themselves in their experience or technical abilities. So much is really valuing their voice and their feedback in the content process, and continuing to like new interns and new voices from Gen Z frequently. So that's sounds like kind of part of that answer, right?
It's exactly it. I mean, we had so much content as a result, and we were then able to organize all that content from that internship competition. And from there, it's like, oh, like this is the pulse, right? This is the finger on the pulse that we sometimes don't get an opportunity to really connect to. And then being really hands-on with the team, but hands-on in a way that allows them to just flow and create, while keeping some guardrails in there. So yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting about saying get Gen Z involved, but it's not hard to do, right? Like you opened this. I mean, how many applicants did you? It sounds like Gen Z wants to help and communicate and make their voice
100%.
heard. So I think it's on brands to just be open to that eagerness and leverage that instead of being afraid of it.
Yeah. So we got thousands of applicants, and my position, I feel that influencer marketing, it created an animal. It's like, it's like having a pet dragon. It created an animal that began to cannibalize the real influence that brands actually have. So you have marketing teams in-house as well as agencies that are fully dedicated to getting ROAS in the influencer marketing space. And so you're going to have companies that are going to pay for that. But in that exchange, you actually begin to give brand value and brand influence away to a second or third party. And so if you could take that back and put it inside internally in your house, and then work together with these influencers or agencies to then create programming content, then you have something. Because right now, Gen Z, millennials, cuspers, anyone that is like 35 and under, there's so much energy that's being created now over the last 6 months that has nowhere to go. And so if you can harness that in a way that allows you as a brand to be the real influencer in partnership, then you got something. And
It appears we may have lost Martin and potentially my. Hey Martin, I think we had another brief.
Another outage.
Yeah,
Another outage. Are
but
we
you're back.
breaking the
You're
internet?
back. We did.
Still pent up energy right now. Are you still there or no? You there?
Hear you now.
All right. There's so much energy in these demographics from millennial all the way down. If you give them an outlet and want to participate with them in partnership with them, where you actually as a brand become the influencer of the influencer rather than the influencer helping your brand establish itself in demographics, to me that's like cooking with gas. Like you're really in it now, and you're a partner. You're helping prescribe how your mission and values come across, as opposed to having it fit in with an influencer that can develop crossover or overlap.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're talking about is really the authenticity piece again, and like how can influencer marketing at its core, it's kind of a paradox, right? It's called influencer marketing. It's meant to be, more authentic, but influencers can turn into ads pretty quickly if they're not authentic to the product or the kind of content that they're creating. So I think creating more of a partnership with an influencer. I actually really like how TikTok talks about influencers as creators and creator marketing. And it's not just about their influence; it's because they're creating great content. And I think that's at the core of why they're even an influencer. It's because they're a creator. And we don't really have influencers unless there's that creation. So I think it's awesome that you're finding even better ways to work with influencers that make them even more authentic and really capture like what an influencer is supposed to be is a creator who's a brand ambassador. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
I have a few questions coming in that I want to ask you, but this one is like kind of back where we were talking about all the different channels that you're in. How do you know what's working or not? Like we definitely understand page views and impressions, but how do you really measure the impact of the different channels you're creating content for?
well, each platform has a different use, right? So the goal of we're not on TikTok, but let's just say the goal of engagement on TikTok looks very different than it would on the blog, right? So it's having clear, defined metrics and measurements that you can hold your team accountable to, as well as your strategy, right? You can't prescribe a strategy if you don't know what you're really measuring and what the goal of that strategy is. So clearly define that goal, get super granular with it, and then start A/B testing across those different channels. And each channel is a different breed of animal, right? So they take on a life of their own. So don't be too rigid in that goal set. And especially when you're A/B testing, throw everything at it. Like, don't be scared. That's the one thing that I speak ad nauseum about to teams. Like, don't operate in fear. Go with your gut, have a feeling, and then take a position, for sure.
Yep, right on. And what are some of the biggest mistakes that you have seen when marketers are trying to use new platforms?
Lack of authenticity. That's a huge mistake. It's like, oh man, we got to fit this campaign into the platform that's prescribed this way, and it's got to show up this way, and it's got to look a certain way, and it's got to feel a certain way, and it has to have high production value. And the message is just lost, or the mission is just lost, or the why of the brand spirit is lost, or it's just not translated well, right? And during quarantine, and I think this is across the board for everyone at least that I've spoken to. Um, Content was like quick and dirty. Like production value was low. It didn't need to look polished. Like it just needed to get put out there. And I would encourage marketers to do the same. Like the teams that I help manage, that's like the one thing that is, you get carte blanche. There's no bad idea. There's no bad test. It may not work, but then something that you didn't think of that was out of the box, that was just like kind of thrown together and pushed out there, might have just like killed it.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. We see we work with a lot of like large legacy or heritage brands who I think have they're very used to moving more slowly, right? And
Yeah.
they're used to having a creative team come up with a creative concept that then goes into design production, and then once it's done, it could be another 2 weeks just for it to be approved by
Right.
the right group so it can go out and market. But this idea of like not being afraid to jump in and create content, and it's actually more authentic if it's created if it's created quickly and doesn't go through these lengthy review processes. Yeah.
100%. We do that. We put some guardrails together, and I don't know if I lost you, Casey. Are you there?
I got you. Yeah, loud and clear.
We put some guardrails together, and obviously, you abide by the brand book and what you can and cannot say, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you're following those guidelines inside of that box, like, go. And it's a pretty big box that we allow the team to kind of navigate through. That's where
Yep.
creativity.
What are those what guardrails, and what level in the organization are those guardrails set? Like, does it have to do with current events and things we don't want to kind of address
Um,
necessarily, or like how do you?
yeah, it used to be no politics, no religion. Let's just talk about what it means to exist as a human. If you stripped all that away, what food and science and health and wellness is. And then, we have very specific language at Bulletproof. Like there's some words that folks aren't able to use. Like, I'll give you an example. There's four: can't, try, bad, and need. Four words you can never use in a piece of content ever. There's a bunch more, but those are like the four big ones. And we always want to speak from a one-on-one perspective. So there's no we, there's no us. It's just like, hey, it's you and me, and this is where we're at. We're speaking in a conversation. So there's a lot more than that, but those are kind of like fundamental.
Nice. I like I mean those are very the words that you stay away from are like negative words that probably it's not specific to your brand, but I think a lot of marketers
Yeah.
could learn from not you can work, you can move really quickly, but I think these basic guidelines are important so that everything is at least positive and promoting the right kind of brand identity that you want. Can you tell us about some other brands that you look up to, or who's doing social and content creation really well?
Right now, I mean, man, I always keep going back. I keep going back to Ben and Jerry's. I can't get them out of my brain. Just because they're really not talking about ice cream. They're talking about what's going on that matters to people in their lives right now, and it's translating into legacy credibility. And they're operating from an education standpoint, which I love. That's that value factor. You gotta love Patagonia right now. Like, they are clearly flexing their position when it comes to current events and politics, and Burger King crushing it. I'm liking what, amazingly so, what iHeart Radio is doing right now. And they're finding a way to engage with their community outside of live events and experiential, and still be relevant. Yeah, those are some that actually just pop to the top of my head at the moment.
Nice. Right on. Well, I've been wanting to ask you this just personally. I'm a big NBA fan. Just maybe taking a break for a second. I'd love to just get some bubble predictions from you. What are we going to see? What's going to happen over the next? What's going to happen over the next 2 weeks? Is LeBron going to get?
People don't want to hear that. Oh, actually, by the way, since you brought this up, I will say the NBA has done a phenomenal job on the marketing side. They're probably right now my number one. They are crushing it. Not just only with their experiential side in the bubble with the virtual fans, but social media. I saw over the weekend they were doing interviews that they were broadcasting on network TV, but also streaming across social platforms, where guys were going through their warm-ups and doing it in real time, live, with their partnership with Beats headphones, and being able to have those conversations wirelessly behind, like, the behind the scenes kind of deal, which I think is incredible. Bubble predictions. The Lakers, man, they look just really good. They look really good and unstoppable. Miami, being a kid from South Florida, I have to give them a bit of an edge, just simply because I think they're gritty and they're hungry. I got some personal relationships there too, so I got to root for Coach
Right on.
Spo.
Yeah, and I love the rookies and getting them in rotation and having an impact early on. It's fun. I gotta say also, when it comes to that, I can't remember the last time before this that I've gotten like goosebumps from seeing like a marketing presence from a brand. But
Yeah.
the NBA has just done such a good job, and I think it's so cool how they brought, like, the players were really part of the communication. Like, part of the reason that they agreed to do the bubble was to use their voice. And I think the whole restart wasn't like, we need to have a title winner in 2020. Right. It was like, with everything that's going on, like, we do have a voice, and this is the biggest stage that we have to use it. So I think the reason that basketball continued probably to do with basketball is it has to do with players, and knowing that the NBA does have a story that they want to tell, and it is about empowerment. So I've been super impressed as well with what the NBA has been doing.
They're crushing it on the social side, crushing it. And I mean, forget sports. I mean, if you're an event or an experiential or a platform that used to have significant physical presence and now has to figure out a way to be digital, the NBA, they should write a case study about it. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've keep in touch with you, and maybe talk more about the NBA one of these times when we don't have as much of an audience, because I'd love to pick your brain more. It's funny when we're talking and having connection issues. I'm used to that happening a lot. I'm on Zoom meetings every day, but not used to doing it where I have a big audience watching me have connection issues. So that's a new situation. But yeah, just want to thank you again, Martin. And we're gonna go on with the agenda to our next speaker.